Grüß Gott. Warum sind Sie hier? Warum sind Sie hier? Why are you here? Are you here to eat a schnitzel in Steffenplatz? Or watch the österreichische Mannschaft in der Prater? Or drink a beer? Why are you here? Why are we here? Why do we exist? Why do we live? Now, this is this question has been asked so many times by philosophers, and it's so many times it was asked that it becomes almost a joke. But in fact, it's a big question. And the more we live, and as we age, we ask this question very often. At least I do. Why do I exist? Is it to watch television and to eat chips? What's the point? Is this an accident? Now, I was wondering about this. And existential questions, because what we're talking about is existential questions. Existential questions throughout the ages were dealt by philosophers. So if you read the ancient Greeks like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they dealt about these issues. Why are we here? What is the purpose of life? And all these questions that became almost a joke today. And these guys, they were talking about this, which was called philosophy, but they also dealt about other issues. You read Aristotle, and he wrote about literature, he wrote about medicine, physics. These were people who had a wide knowledge of a little bit of everything. Now, philosophy in the 20th century stopped dealing with existential questions. And it began with an Austrian philosopher, a guy called Ludwig Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein started to deal about language, and that's what philosophy deals today. It's about language, not existential questions. Why? Because the existential questions are dealt by scientists. In the 20th century, because of the development of mathematics and physics and biology and all fields of what we called pure sciences were dealt by scientists often with formulas and equations which philosophers could not understand. They could not understand what they were reading, and they realized they were not able to follow through the existential questions, because as scientists we deal with the fabrics of reality. So the field of existential questions changed to science. Now there is a problem here. Scientists were doing major discoveries. And I'm not talking only about Isaac Newton. I'm talking about Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, Heisenberg, and this great Austrian Erwin Schrödinger. They were making profound discoveries in physics. But these men were extremely intelligent. And of course they had a grasp of things which we don't have, hopefully, because to have that kind of grasp you have to be a little bit crazy, They were not prepared to make the philosophical links related to discoveries they were making. So when I started working on these subjects, I realized that there was a lot to do here. You see, what is science in the end of the day? Science is a dialogue. And let's look at science as a dialogue between us, human beings, and nature. Okay? So let us suppose I'm a religious person, and I'd say, well, I wonder why when I jump, I don't keep going, I fall down. So I can say, well, God, please explain to me why is it when I jump, I fall down. And I'm sure if I wait half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, 2 days, 3 days, nobody will answer. Maybe I get a recording saying, this is God, I'm not in for the moment, please leave a message after the beep. But bottom line is, I won't get an answer. So we developed this system we call science to ask questions. How do we ask questions? Well, suppose we have here, I brought a, oh, this is not a euro. Try to find an euro. Oh, there's a euro. It's Portuguese euro. Came from Lisbon this morning. So let's suppose I have a coin of an euro, and I say, if I open my fingers, what will happen? So I'll do it. The coin fell down. So what took place here? Well, I made an experiment, okay? And in an experiment, it's a question. So by opening my fingers, I asked nature a question. What happens when I open my fingers? And nature responded. She answered, and she said, it falls down. So no matter how many times you do it, it will always fall down. And this is nature talking to us. Our job is to understand this answer. Okay? So this is science. We do an experiment, and the result of the experiment is nature answering us. Okay? We don't talk this dialogue is not in German, or in Portuguese, or in English, or in Korean. It's in science. It's a dialogue. We talk to nature. Nature responds to us. We interpret the answer. We try to, what did she mean by doing that? And that's our job, okay? So, my job here, I'm not a scientist, though I taught at university for 25 years. I am a novelist. And what's the role of literature here? I would draw a triangle, okay? On the top of the triangle, I would put philosophy. On one side, I would put science. And on the other side of the triangle, I would put literature. So what is literature, really? Literature began as an exercise, first a recording of events, of course, but then stories began to be told. So you get in Old Summer, in Babylon, there you have the epopee of Gilgamesh. It's the first big story, fictional story. And then you have in Northern Europe, the Beowulf, the story of the Beowulf, which apparently has some links with Neanderthal, okay? Some stories about Neanderthal, when humans and Neanderthal were living together. And then you've got, of course, the Bible. The Bible is a bunch of stories. Stories are historical stories that were collected throughout the ages, and they tell stories about, in this case, the story of the Jewish people. Okay? So this is how writing began to develop into novels, into fiction. And in the 20th century, literature underwent a major change because we had the Great War, the First World War, and things were pretty ugly. A lot of people were dying. If you look at the Second Battle of Ypres, 500,000 soldiers died in 1 week. Can you imagine 500,000? It would be a major scandal today if you have a battle where 500 people die. And you had like 500,000 people dying in 1 week. And it was accepted. So artists, they revolted to this. They said, we cannot accept this. No, reality is too ugly. Reality is really ugly. So, why are we doing beautiful art? Art should not be beautiful. Art should be ugly. Okay? So we have this French guy called Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp, he went to America, and he came up with, there was an art exhibition in New York, and he presented a piece of art which was called La Fontaine, the fountain. Okay, the fountain, like a water fountain. And what was it? It was an urinal. You know, urinal? All men know you go to a toilet, in a public toilet, and you do it against urinal where you urinate. Okay, so it was a urinal. So the Americans were outraged. It's not a piece of art, it's an industrial urinal. You cannot do that. But so they refused it. So it began, there was a major debate in artistic circles in America that, we have to, because it's an artist who created it for artistic purposes. No, it's an urinal. You cannot do it. You have it in toilets in public places. It's not a piece of art. It's not beautiful. But art should not be beautiful. Look at what's going on in Europe. Millions are dying in the war, in industrial war. So the urinal is ugly, but it's art because it's expressed reality. Reality is shitty, So we have to. It's a piece of art. So Marcel Duchamp came up with the concept that art should be ugly. And this concept, it affected painter. So you have painter like painting. If you look at Pollock, it's not actually beautiful, but it's trying to show how complicated the life is and stuff. So they went into this, and it touched many fields of artistic movements, including literature. So you get this French movement of literature called the Nouveau Roman, the new novel, okay? The Nouveau Roman in France, the idea was, okay, let's write books that are ugly, like La Fontaine of Duchamp in sculpture. So let's write books that are unreadable. So they began writing books like that, there was no story at all. They would do like language experiences. Now, this idea of the Nouveau Roman, it infected, it contaminated the entire continental European literature. Not Anglo-Saxon, okay? The British and the Americans, they kept away. Well, they had some influence of Nouveau Roman in some areas, but mainly they kept the traditional novel going on. And in Europe, continental Europe, suddenly it became fashionable to write books that nobody could understand. And people would say, like snobbish, oh, I'm reading this so and so on. No, he could not read it. It's unreadable. But they were doing it because it was fashionable, okay? And the idea that literature should not be pretty because reality is ugly. So literature should not be beautiful. It should be ugly and not understandable. So that's how literature developed in continental Europe. Now, I have to say that I accept this literature as perfectly normal and acceptable, except that literature is not really only about language. You have authors who say, oh, the story is not important. I can even write a novel without a story. And there are some books of the Nouveau Roman tradition which they don't have a story. It almost killed literature, I have to tell you, because common readers, they could not understand. Of course, it was fashionable to have these authors, but you could not read them, really. You were saying to them, everybody, it's beautiful, but you could not read it. So, I believe that we live in a misconception about literature, which there is a strong literary tradition in continental Europe. I don't know what's the reality about Austria, but I'm sure it's very much like Portugal or France, where it's all about style, it's all about writing. What it says is not important. And I disagree with that. I believe that novels are about content. When I write, I try to write clearly. If the reader does not understand what I write, it's not his fault. It's my fault. I was not clear enough. Okay? So I'm much more in an Anglo-Saxon tradition of writing clear. Also, very important, the words, for me, when you're reading them, they disappear. So you're not reading the words anymore. You're seeing what the words are saying. So, for example, Das Einstein-Liebe begins in Princeton, 1951, a meeting between Einstein and Ben-Gurion, the Israeli president. So, suddenly, you are not in Vienna, 2018. You are in Princeton, America, 1951. And there's Albert Einstein and there's Ben-Gurion, and you're watching the conversation they're having. So, you're not reading the words anymore. You are seeing the scene. But by doing that, my point is, the most important thing about writing this way is not just showing the scene. The scene is an instrument for something more important, which is telling the story. You are telling a story, okay? So you use words to create scenes, and these scenes are their instrument to tell a story. But the story in itself is also an instrument. It's not the end in itself. The story is an instrument to something more important, which is truth. Literature is about truth, okay? When you read, for example, I'm trying to read some books that are part of your cultural heritage. Let's see, The Process by Franz Kafka. When you read The Process, this is a great book. Why? Is it because it doesn't tell a story? No, it tells a story. But it's such an important book because it tells you something profoundly true about justice in a totalitarian system, where you are charged with something you don't know what, and even yourself, even because you did not do it, you become convinced that you are guilty. And a lot of people from the Eastern Bloc, they talk about this today, because they are free now to talk. And Kafka, he expressed this deep truth, and that's why The Process by Franz Kafka is such a great book. When you read the soldier Spike story, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, about the soldier who's a Czech and does not understand what's going on, is actually sabotaging things. The author is telling a deep truth about the contradictions inside the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. The conflicts and the people going in one direction and others going on the other directions. And so, this is what literature is all about. When you read, for example, in French literature, Flaubert's Madame Bovary, it's a great book. Why? The story is it should be a common story today, but in the 19th century, you have an author talking about a married woman who has affairs outside of wedlock. And this was a major scandal. You could not talk about these issues in the 19th century. You can do it now, but not in those days, and Flaubert did it. So it's a great book because he expresses a hidden truth. And this is what literature is all about. Something about style. Of course style is important, but style is not the end in itself. Style is an instrument to get somewhere, to allow you to tell the story in a clear way that everybody understands, in a pleasant way, if possible, but to reach the ultimate object of it, which is reaching the truth of things. Now, you are going to tell me, well, what's truth? There are many truths. And so, what do you mean when you're reaching truth? There is not such a thing as one truth. Well, I think here we are making a major blunder of interpretation, because of course there are truths. I am Portuguese, or am I Austrian? I am Portuguese, that's true. I'm Austrian, that's a lie. So there is truth. Okay? The concept that truth is relative, it was developed in the 19th century by an American philosopher called William James. He created the current called pragmatism. Now, William James came up with the idea that, well, all truth is relative. And we should, in fact, so what is truth is what is useful. If something is useful for what you want to do, that's true. If it's unuseful, then it's not true. Now, it was this kind of philosophy that contaminated politics. That's why you watch a politician. He's in opposition, he says one thing, and he goes to government, he says the opposite. Because he's following the William James pragmatic school of truth is what is useful. Okay? So you get things like, for example, Stalin going to a picture of Lenin with Trotsky and Zinoviev, and they just cut the picture because it's not useful anymore. It's actually counter-useful. So you start changing reality because, hey, there is no truth. You know, everything is relative. And this is not so. We are confusing truth with opinions. To say that Meg Ryan is prettier than Angelina Jolie, that's an opinion. That's not a fact. But to say that I am Portuguese and I'm not Austrian, that's a fact. Okay? So sometimes we use the word truth for things which are actually opinions. And in fact, opinions are subjective. But truth is truth. I'm a journalist as my background, so in my profession we always say, opinions are free, but facts are sacred. And it's a fact that I'm Portuguese. That's a fact. It's not a matter of opinion. If this person is prettier than the other, that's an opinion. If this dish is better than what the other dish, that's an opinion. But there are some things which are facts, okay? Of course, we can go to metaphysics here and go and say, well, maybe tomorrow I wake up and I realize I was a butterfly that was dreaming that he was a man who was talking in university in Vienna. Yeah, that's possible, but we are not dealing with metaphysics here. We are dealing with the reality of what we live. So I'm talking about this because what I want to express to you is that literature is about truth. And that's what philosophy is about. And that's what science is about. Our quest to get to truth. And that's why I write my novels. I'm a novelist, of course. But my novels, for example, you read Das Einstein Enigma, it's a philosophical novel, but it's a scientific novel as well. And in fact, it's a quest for truth. Who are we? Why do we exist? Is there a God? And if so, what is God? So, this is our quest in that novel, Das Einstein Enigma. I believe, you know, we are used to think of God as a religious thing. You know, there is the Christians who say this, and the Muslims who say that, and the Buddhists who say whatever. And I believe that God is a scientific problem. It's not merely a religious problem. And when we're talking about the subject of the book, which is there a scientific proof of God's existence? We have to do a first step, which is to try to do something which is basic in science, which is we have to define the subject. When we talk about God, what are we talking about? Now, are we talking about an old man with white beard that is watching the world and listening to our prayers? That's what we imagine, okay? And science has not found such an entity. Such a God does not exist. If you go, you pick a telescope in a starry night and you look at the skies, you will not find such a birded man, like the gentleman over there. You'll just find stars, okay? So, our anthropomorphic vision of God is something that is our creation. And when we say man created God, this is true up to a certain extent. Yes, we anthropomorphize God and we imagine something. Now, in science, we cannot do it. So when we're talking about God in science, what are we talking about? We are talking about three things. First thing, we have to perceive God as something natural. God is something natural. It's not something which is supernatural or, you know, mystical. No. It's something natural. He does not break the laws of physics. Okay? He's all powerful and he can, you know, lightning and thunder will come for no whatever reason. No, it does not happen that way. Okay? So, the first step is we have to think of God as something which is natural. Like electricity. Oh, is that artificial? No. Actually, it's not artificial, it's natural. electricity exists in nature. It's just that we, as human beings, manage to use the laws of nature in our advantage. So we have electricity in the evening, but electricity is part of nature. Oxygen is part of nature. So we have to think of God as something which is natural. The second thing is, if we are trying to define God and find God using scientific methods, we have to think of, is the universe intelligent? This is very important. And the answer is very obvious. Yes, sure, the universe is very intelligent. Just look around you, you know. The way the universe is built. For example, let's suppose after this lecture we go to a restaurant and we eat schnitzel, okay? And so it's meat. It's meat, isn't it? Okay, so it's a steak, basically, done in a peculiar way. So the cow there, so we get the energy from there, but where did the energy comes from? Well, it comes from the cow, but where did the cow get the energy from? Well, she ate some grass, okay, and where did the grass get the energy from? Well, photosynthesis. It came from the sun. So it's a very clever system, you know. Energy is produced by the sun, by the stars, and it reaches the grass. It becomes captured by photosynthesis, and then the animal eats it and gets the energy. So all the energy we have, you use its energy that comes from the sun. This is very intelligent. It's very clever. Look at evolution, the laws of evolution that Charles Darwin uncovered. You know, it's all natural, but it's so clever, the system. How we evolve through mutations and stuff. You know, this is a very clever idea. So yes, the universe is very intelligent. It's so subtle. You know, there is a famous sentence by Albert Einstein. I'm trying to say it in German. It's part of the book, which is raffiniert ist Gott, aber beschafft ist er nicht. Boshaft, okay. Entschuldigung for my poor German, but I guess you understand. So this raffiniert, the subtlety of how the universe is built, it's amazing. So yes, the universe, so yeah, okay, we look at God as a natural thing, and second, yes, the universe is very intelligent. But, that's the third point of this very complicated one. Is that intelligence an accident? A result of, you know, just an accident, you know, something that came from no reason whatever, or is there a purpose? Now, this is where the thing gets trickier, because when we're talking about intention, I don't know if any of you is studying for law, or any of you is a lawyer, but, you know, in law, it's well known that in a court of law, it's very difficult to prove intention. Okay, person A killed person B, but did she do it on purpose? Yes or no? Only the person who did it knows it for sure. Now, we try to understand her actions. For example, she said, "I hate you." And then she grabs the gun, and, oh yeah, there's intent, because I'm assuming. But in the end of the day, we cannot be 100% sure, because intentions are within us. We know what our intention is. But people who are outside, they are not in our hands, so they can assume things from things that how we behave, but in fact, they will never know for sure. So here's the thing about this. How can we understand that if the intelligence of the universe is intentional or accidental? This is the big trick. There are a bunch of discoveries which the book talks about in length that actually point into intention. Let me give you, try to give you an image of a metaphor for what these discoveries. These are discoveries that were made from 1980 until now. It's been under big debate in scientific circles. However, the general public is not aware of this debate. And some crazy theories came up to try to explain these discoveries. These discoveries point to extreme coincidences in the way the universe is built. Coincidences that mean if for example, 1% of the fine structure of the atom was 1% stronger, no life was possible. If it was 0.5% weaker, no life was possible. So we got the right result. And we got the right result in a lot of things. So to give you an example to explain this, let us suppose this morning I woke up in Lisbon. Oh, sorry, okay, yesterday I was in Lisbon. I was in Lisbon and let us suppose that I bought a lottery. Okay? And guess what? I won! Yeah, no, it's very unlikely that I win the lottery, but someone has to win the lottery because it's there. So, yeah, I was the lucky one. So, millionaire, thank you. Dankeschön. Okay, today in Vienna, I go and I buy the lottery, and hey, I win again. Now, this is weird. No, he wins on Sunday, and then on Monday he wins again in a different country. This is weird. And then I suppose that tomorrow I go to Paris, and guess what? I win again. Do you know what will happen? The police will go and arrest me, because they know for sure it's no coincidence. There's a trick going on. Okay? So for life to exist in the universe, it requires not one jackpot, not two, not three. It requires thousands of jackpots. And that's where you get attention. It's no coincidence that a lot of these things have to be as they are for life to exist. So, and we go through these things in the novel. So I will say that we are talking about the jackpots of jackpots. Also, there are some things that we can think of. There is a video I have on the internet which I talk about this, and I think it's interesting, but we'll go over this. Suppose, for example, I wonder if we have one. No? Well, suppose we find a flower. Okay? We find a flower. And we don't think much about it. It's a flower. It's beautiful. It's pretty. But it's a flower, so it's a common thing. Okay? So, but let us suppose that instead of a flower, I find, I destroyed the pen, so I'll just get another pen. I find a pen. I find a pen, and I look at the pen, and I know two things about the pen. First thing, I know the pen, it serves a purpose. Okay? The pen exists for something, to write. And second thing I know about the pen, I know that someone invented the pen. I do not know who the person is, but I do know that someone invented the pen. A guy I don't know, but he did it. So, if I can say something like this about something so simple as a pen, why can I not say the same thing about a flower? Which is actually much more clever and intelligent than a mere pen. A flower is a very clever device. Why do I take the flower for granted? And the pen, I know that someone created it with a purpose. Why is there no purpose to the flower, which is much more complex? I have a computer here. If I ask an engineer, what is a computer? He will tell me, well, the computer, you have some chips and some wires and electronic stuff, and he'll make an explanation of what a computer is, and it's of course quite right. But a computer is much more than wires and chips and stuff, A computer is about YouTube and Microsoft. It's, a bunch of, even Instagram, which is a portable, it's a mobile, it's a computer, of course, so Instagram and Facebook and whatnot, So a computer is not only about the hardware, it's also about the software. Likewise, if you ask a scientist, a physicist, what is the universe? He's going to answer to you, well, the universe is, electrons and protons and atoms and molecules and planets and stars and galaxies and stuff. And he's right, of course. But my question is, it's just describing the hardware. What is the software? What's the program running on this hardware? Because you can be sure that there is a program going on, and the scientist is just describing the hardware, because he has no philosophical preparation for it. Because the people who are philosophically prepared to understand the discoveries, they are not scientifically prepared to understand them. Okay? And the scientists who understand the discoveries, they are not philosophically prepared to make the links of the significance and the sense of these discoveries. So that's what I try to do in my novels. I try to establish the links, using literature, which is a quest for truth, using science as an instrument to reach, to do, there are thrills, so there is a killing, there is some action going on, but in the end of the day, they are philosophical novels. They deal about truth. They deal about the deepest truth of them all. So that's what I do in my novels. I would say that there is another image I like to use. Suppose there is a Persian rug here. It's a beautiful rug. And there is an ant walking on top of the rug. I can say to the ant, hey, what a beautiful rug you're walking on. And the ant, she'll answer to me, well, what rug? It's nothing, it's just some surface I'm walking on. Because the ant, she lacks the perspective. She needs to be taken off the rug to gain a vantage point, to see the rug and see how beautiful it is. Oh, it's a Persian rug. It's so beautiful with its designs. And he could not see it. She could not see it when she was walking on top of the rug. So I would say that we are walking on top of rugs. We are inside the computer. And because of that, we cannot see the program. We cannot see the pattern. We cannot see the design of the rug. And my effort, and I think that's the job of the philosophers and the novelists, is to take that perspective. Take the ant, that's the reader, from the rug and gain a vantage point to see the pattern in the rug. To see how these different discoveries, they link together and they make a picture. Okay? We are trying to understand the picture because that's what science is all about. Understanding the fabrics of reality. Understanding the place where we live. And remember, the question of God is such an important one, not because of religious purposes. It's because if there is no God, it means it's an accident. And if universe is an accident, it means there is no reason for us to be here. It's an accident. However, if there is a God, even if it is not the God that religions paint, but if there is an entity which is intentional and intelligent, then there is a sense to life. We are here for a reason. We certainly will never know what's the reason, but we are here for a reason. We don't live, nothing is by accident. So I would say that that's the main point of my novel, Das Einstein Enigma, to try to understand the meaning of things, understand the discoveries and the implications of these discoveries philosophically to reach the bottom line, the truth of our existence. Now, I wasn't happy only with Das Einstein Enigma, so I wrote a second novel, The Key of Solomon, Der Schlüssel des Salomon. Okay? And this also deals with metaphysics. The subject here is not actually existence of God, that's dealt with Das Einstein Enigma, but what happens when we die? What happens when we die? Is it the end of everything? Or does it exist? Is there something else? When I had this idea, it was a crazy idea, because how can we know what happens when we die, really? So I thought, well, it's a too ambitious concept, so impossible to develop. But in the end of the day, I found something which was interesting. In medicine, there are people who go into coma, and when they recover, they say some peculiar things. They'll say basically they have one experience that we can divide in 3 parts, okay? First is out-of-body experience. They have the perception that they get out of the body, you know, and they sort of float, they go to the roof, and they see themselves lying on bed, and even the nurses around trying to recover, the doctors around. A lot of people that had, for example, cardiac arrests, they talk about this. Others talk about the tunnel. They are in a dark tunnel, okay? And it's a pleasant feeling they have. They are sort of floating in the tunnel, and there is some light at the end of the tunnel. There are other people who talk about they get into a place which is marvelous. Someone, maybe someone from their family who died, or maybe some angelical person welcomes you on the other side and shows you around. It's such a pleasant place, and in the end you want to stay, and he says, no, you cannot. You have to go back, and you return. You wake up. Okay. Some people have the 3 experiences. They go out of the body, they go to the tunnel, and then they go to this place. Most of the people have one experience or the other. We know one thing about these experiences. People are not lying. They're not making up these stories. This is well studied in medicine. There's a percentage of people like 12%, 50%, 15% who have these experiences. They're expressing the truth of it. The problem is interpreting these experiences. What do they mean? And there is the main theory is it's hallucination. So you are dying. Dying is a stressful process, and the brain, because it understands it's dying, it releases chemicals which will help you deal with the situation. Okay, which try to make it as pleasant as possible. So that's why you have these experiences. Now, the problem of this theory is that, as any psychiatrist will tell you, or neurologist will tell you, hallucinations are not like that. Hallucinations are not visual experiences. People, when they have this experience, by the way, they say it's very rich. The colors are stronger, the sounds are richer, everything is so rich. And hallucinations are actually cognitively very poor. So what is an hallucination? It's actually when you hear someone talking in your head, or 2 voices talking in your head. So it's basically auditory experience. They are not rich, perceptually, they are not very rich experiences. So a psychiatrist or a neurologist will tell you always, it doesn't sound like an hallucination. It's something different. And in the end of the day, you don't know where you're getting. So I was frustrating when I was researching the novel. I was getting nowhere. And in Paris, I met this Canadian, it's a very famous scientist in France, a guy called Hubert. He's from Canada, but he lives in Paris. And I was talking, you're French, you know Hubert? You never heard about Hubert? It's written Hubert Reeves. But you know, it's well known in France. Anyway, I was telling him about my difficulties in writing a novel and researching into the subject. And he said, take a look at Bell's theorems. You know, Bell's theorems. I heard about this. I knew about this, but I never studied it in depth. So when I got back to Lisbon, I started researching Bell theorems. And the Bell theorems, they brought me into something very mysterious, which is the double-slit experiment. This is a 19th century experiment in physics. It's done, I'm sure, in Wien University. It's done in universities all over the world, okay? It's a very simple experiment, a bit difficult to understand. So I have here a video that explains, it's a 5-minute video, and graphically it explains the experience. It's a very mysterious experience. So let's take a look at it. Oh, okay. So in German it's called
Spaltsterbend. Okay, sehr gut, wunderbar.
Und jetzt kommen wir zu einem Urvater des Quantenmysteriums, dem berüchtigten Doppelspaltexperiment. Um dieses Experiment zu verstehen, müssen wir uns zunächst ansehen, wie Teilchen oder kleine Gruppen von Materie sich verhalten. Wenn wir ein kleines Objekt, zum Beispiel eine Glaskugel, zufällig auf eine Projektionsfläche abfeuern, sehen wir hinten ein Muster an der Stelle, wo sie durch den Spalt schoss und aufgetroffen ist. So, wenn wir jetzt einen zweiten Spalt hinzufügen, würden wir erwarten, auch einen zweiten Streifen rechts daneben an der Wand zu sehen. Nun, lasst uns Lichtwellen ansehen. Die Wellen treffen auf den Spalt und strahlen auf die hintere Wand aus, mit einer Intensität, die dort am größten ist, wo sie direkt durch den Spalt zielen. Die Helligkeit des Streifens auf der hinteren Projektionsfläche zeigt diese Intensität an. Das ist in etwa mit dem Streifen, den die Murmel verursacht, zu vergleichen. Aber wenn wir einen zweiten Spalt hinzufügen, passiert etwas völlig anderes. Wenn das obere Ende eines Lichtstrahls das untere Ende eines anderen Strahls berührt, löschen sie sich gegenseitig aus. Also gibt es eine Überlagerung im Muster an der hinteren Wand. An der Stelle, wo die beiden Spitzen sich treffen, gibt es die höchste Intensität, die hellsten Linien. Und wo sie sich gegenseitig aufheben, ist gar nichts. So, wenn wir Dinge, das heißt also Materie, durch zwei Öffnungen feuern, sehen wir hinten auch zwei Streifen des Aufpralls. Bei Wellen erhalten wir ein überlagertes Muster aus mehreren Streifen. Gut, soweit. Nun, auf zu den Quanten. Ein Elektron ist ein winziger Teil von Materie. Wie eine kleine Murmel. Lassen Sie uns einen Elektronenstrahl durch den Spalt schießen. Er verhält sich genau wie die Murmel, ein einziger Streifen. Wenn wir also diese kleinen Teilchen durch zwei Schlitze schießen, sollten wir wie bei der Murmel zwei Streifen bekommen. Was? Eine Interferenz des Musters, eine Überlagerung? Wir haben Elektronen abgefeuert, kleine Teilchen von Materie. Aber wir erhalten ein Wellenmuster, anders als bei den Murmeln. Wie das denn? Wie können Materieteilchen ein Interferenzmuster wie bei Wellen hervorrufen? Das ergibt keinen Sinn. Aber die Physiker sind clever. Sie dachten, vielleicht prallen die kleinen Elektronenkugeln aufeinander und verursachen dabei das Muster. Also schossen sie einzelne Elektronen nacheinander ab, sodass sie nicht miteinander in Kontakt kommen konnten. Aber nach gut einer Stunde trat das gleiche Interferenzmuster auf. Die Schlussfolgerung daraus ist unausweichlich. Das einzelne Elektron macht sich als Teilchen auf den Weg, schießt durch beide Öffnungen, beeinflusst sich dabei selbst und trifft als Teilchen auf die Wand. Aber mathematisch gesehen ist das noch seltsamer. Es geht durch beide Spalten und durch keinen. Und es geht erst durch einen Spalt und dann durch den anderen. Alle diese Möglichkeiten stehen in Superposition zueinander. Aber die Physiker waren völlig verblüfft von dieser Entdeckung. Und so versuchten sie, einen Blick zu erhaschen, um festzustellen, durch welchen Schlitz es entschwunden war. Sie haben an einem der Schlitze ein Messgerät angebracht, um zu sehen, wo es durchgekommen war, und ließen es fliegen. Aber die Welt der Quanten ist noch mysteriöser, als sie gedacht hatten. Als sie es beobachteten, verhielt sich das Elektron wieder wie eine kleine Murmel. Es produzierte ein Muster aus zwei Streifen und nicht das Interferenzmuster aus vielen Streifen. Der Akt des Messens an sich oder die Beobachtung des Vorgangs hatte zur Folge, dass es nur durch einen, nicht zwei Schlitze kam. Das Elektron entschied sich anders zu agieren. So, als wüsste es, dass es beobachtet wird. Und es geschah hier, dass die Physiker für immer in die seltsame Welt der Quantenereignisse traten. Was ist Materie? Sind es Murmeln oder Wellen? Und Wellen von was? Und was hat ein Beobachter mit all dem zu tun? Der Beobachter brachte die Wellenfunktion nur durch seine Beobachtung zum Kollabieren.
Now, this is a difficult experiment. It's very simple. As I say, it's from the 19th century, this experiment. But I couldn't understand it quite well, but I'm sure you did. There are some things which are really, really mysterious. First thing is, the experiment tells us that particles, that is matter, it is in two places simultaneously. Now, this is very weird, because if I am here, I am not here. And if I am here, I am not here. But the experiment is telling us that the particle is in both places simultaneously. Okay, because when they only send one particle against the double whatever, it goes through the two slits. And we know that it goes through the two slits because it creates the pattern of interference like a wave. So it's in two places simultaneously. The scientist who discovered this was a British-French physicist called Paul Dirac. He got Nobel Prize for that discovery. Okay? The particle is in two places simultaneously. It's not half of it here and half of it there. No, it's 100% here and 100% there at the same time. This is weird. Actually, Erwin Schrödinger got his Nobel Prize also because of this. Because he came up with an equation called the Schrödinger equation, who calculates the probability of that particle that is everywhere simultaneously to become real in a certain moment. That's the Schrödinger equation. It's the calculus of a ghost, because this shows reality is a ghost. The second big thing about this experiment, it's very weird. For me, it's more weird even than the particle in two places simultaneously, is that when we make the observation of the particle going through the slits, it becomes one particle only. Okay? It becomes real. The moment we stop watching, it becomes two. The moment we start watching, it becomes one again. Why should a particle change its nature because it's being watched or not? How come this happens? You know, this is very, very mysterious. This is the most mysterious experiment existing in physics. It's a real mystery. And so they developed a school called the Copenhagen School that says, don't ask questions, just make the calculations, okay? Because this is too weird. I have to tell you, was it this year, this spring, my publisher took me to Leipzig Buchmesse, and I made a presentation, and at the end of the presentation, this German engineer came to me and said, you know, I've been an engineer for 30 years. For 30 years I've been doing the Schrödinger equation. I never understood it until I read your book. Because it makes no sense. Now, this is the job of novelists, to try to make sense of things, okay? And they came up with two further experiences. One is called the delayed double-slit experiment. The delayed double-slit experiment, basically, they make the measurement after it goes through the slits, okay? And I'm not going to describe the experiment here because it's more particular, but the conclusion is information travels to the past. You understand what I'm saying? Information travels to the past. Usually, I know about the dinosaurs, but the dinosaurs will not know about me because information travels from the past to the future. But from the future to the past, this is unheard of. And yet, this is what the double-slit experiment in a delayed version, which is a later version, shows. Okay? There is a second very weird version of the experiment. It's the delayed consciousness double-slit experiment. That means they make the measurement, okay? The eye is on the slits, but we don't know about the result. And when we do not know about the result, it stays interference. But when we know about the result, immediately it becomes a particle. So it's actually not only the fact that we measure, that we observe. No. It's the fact that we take knowledge of the observation. So the consequence, the implication is consciousness creates reality. And this is crazy. Okay? Because we think that the universe created us. And this is true to a certain extent. But in fact, the double-slit experiment is telling us that we create the universe because we watch it and we are conscious about it. Okay? Do you find this very weird? There's a top American physicist called John Wheeler. You know quantum leaps? The concept of quantum, it's him who created quantum leaps, the concept of quantum foam. So John Wheeler. John Wheeler, he was a disciple of Niels Bohr. And he said, you know, I believe in quantum physics on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Tuesday, I believe on Monday, on Tuesday I don't believe it. And then on Wednesday, I come back to the double-slit experiment and say, well, this is what the experiment is telling us. And nature, she never lies to us. Okay? You talk to a politician, I'm sure he's going to lie to you. But nature, raffiniert ist der Ärger, aber boshaft ist hier nicht. Okay? He's not malicious. He's telling us the truth all the time. Okay? So nature is on. So I come back to the experiment and say, this is what nature is telling me. We create reality. It does not exist. Life. Do you know in computers there's a game called Second Life? Do you know about this game, Second Life? Okay, you've seen that movie of James Cameron called Avatar. You know, okay, where you get, you know. Second Life is you get avatars in a computer. Okay. So here you are, and then you get an avatar, which is a person that it's you, but in a computer. And suppose that in Second Life, your avatar is in a house by the beach, for example. Okay, so he's outside the house. He's in the beach, watching the house. Then he walks and he opens the door and he gets inside the house, in the living room. Okay, so he's not in the beach anymore. My question to you, where is the beach in the computer? Is it gone? No, it's there. But it's there virtually. Because what you see is inside the living room, right? You're not seeing the beach anymore, but it's somewhere in the beach. It's actually not, it's virtually there. So what they found out is that reality, that's what the experiment is telling us, reality is like Second Life. For example, each one of us has a home. This is crazy what I'm going to do. This is science. Each one of us has a home. Okay? Our home is there. Let's suppose nobody's there now. It means that your house right now does not exist because you have no consciousness of the house. You're not there. Okay? You are here. This is the only reality. Now, it's like the beach in the computer. You've left the beach and it's somewhere virtually, but it's not real anymore. The reality is the living room. It's the same here. You go home, you leave this room, it's empty. The room becomes virtual. It's not real anymore because there is no consciousness of it. And it's like the observation or you watching the party, okay? You get to your place and your house suddenly becomes real because you're watching it, okay? We create reality. This is a crazy, crazy discovery of science. It's very difficult to understand. This is why the engineer said, you know, I've done the Schrödinger equation for 30 years. I never understood it because it's so crazy. And now I understand what are the philosophical implications of these scientific discoveries. And they are crazy. The reality is really weird. You know, reality is virtual. And it's us who make it real. So yes, the universe created us, but we also create the universe. And now that brings us back to the near-death experiences which we're talking about. Remember I told you that that's why Hubert talked to me about this, the Bell theorems, which have a link to the double-slit experiment. Now, in the experiment, as you remember, you get to the end of the tunnel, and then there is someone who died, and he welcomes you, and then he talks to you. Now, I have a personal experience in my family. My wife, she's over there. My wife, raise her hand. Her name is Forbella. Okay, Forbella once, a few years ago, in the morning, she woke up and said to me, she never dreams. It's very rare for her to dream. And whenever she dreams, she's always disappointed. Oh, it's a poor dream, you know, it's stupid, it's black and white, and and then one day she woke up and said, I had a wonderful dream. You know, what wonderful? You know, it's full of color, and I was in a tunnel. And I felt so good, and the colors were great and stuff. And there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And on the other side of the tunnel, it was my dad. He was waiting for me. And he showed me around the place, all around. And I thought, oh, this is so great. And I wanted to stay. And eventually said, no, you have 2 daughters, so you have to raise them, and you have to go back. And so she woke up, okay? So when I wrote the novel, eventually, Der Schlüssel des Salomon, in Portugal, when we launch a novel, we have someone who presents a novel. And I chose a psychiatrist, a professor at Lisbon University, whose PhD dissertation was about near-death experiences. Okay, he experimented on this. And then he made a presentation and stuff, and then we were invited for a talk show on TV. So they invited me and they invited him because it's obviously interesting. And when we were doing makeup, I was talking to him and said, look, Professor, there is something that which doesn't add up in this story. And I told him the story of my wife. And I said to him, you know, it doesn't add up because, first, my wife did not have a near-death experience. I mean, she had no coma. She was sleeping. Second thing, her dad was alive. So it's not like she goes to the end of the and sees someone who had died. No, he was alive, you know. So, and he said, you know, I can create this, when I was doing my PhD dissertation on this subject, I found out that using hypnosis, we could reach these states as well. So I got students who helped me out, so they were the guinea pigs of these experiments. And I would induce them through hypnosis to have the experiences, and they had them. And after the experiences, we would talk all together, and they would tell me what they had. And sometimes I would get a student telling me, you know, the person at the end of the tunnel was my grandmom and she's alive, or it was my oldest brother and he's alive, and blah, blah, blah. And every time that happened, I would say to them, can we talk after the presentation? And after the session. So after everybody left, I would tell him, look, every time that happens, the person you had the experience about, he will die soon. So say goodbye to your grandmother or to your brother or whatever, you know. And in fact, my father's wife died a little after this dream. So here we have a situation where you have the future telling you an information. Because when her dad, he was at the end of the tunnel, it was the future informing her that he would die soon. And in fact, through the double-slit experiment, we know today that in fact information travels, not people. We physically do not travel to the past. But the information, it does travel to the past. For example, let us suppose tonight, you know, it's already, what is it? 8:10? So I suppose you're starving already. And after we finish this presentation, you go out, you look at the sky, and you look at the stars, okay, shining. The light in these stars, they left the stars like 1,000 years ago, because maybe some of them are 1,000 years away, light years away, of course. The thing is, the star, she knew somehow that tonight you would watch her. So when she left 1,000 years ago, she didn't leave as a wave, she left as a particle. Because she knew she would be watched by you 1,000 years later. Because information travels from the future to the past. That's what the experiment is telling us. And Botschaft ist hier nicht. Okay, it's not lying to us. Nature does not lie to us. So this is the subject of that novel. And the question I ask is, how can life end if it is life that creates reality? So that is, I guess, the subject of the novel. To wrap it up, what I try to do, as you understand, is using science and using a fictional story to try to reach the truth of things and do it in a pleasant way, because when we are reading a story, we want to, it's a page turner, so you want to read what happens next, but you also learn something. So, you know, we have this word in Portuguese, I know in French it exists, I'm not sure, yeah, it exists in English, of course, pastime. Pastime. Reading a novel is a pastime, okay? Because you pass the time in a pleasant way. But what I usually try to say is that what I try to write is not pastime, it's game time. Because you enjoy reading, but also you gain knowledge of things. And in a way, how can I put it? I try, this is a joke of course, but I try to write about science in a way that even the scientist understands. Thank you very much.
Zum Abschluss noch ein paar Worte auf Deutsch. Ich hoffe, der Vortrag hat Ihnen gefallen. Und wenn Sie José noch etwas öfter hören oder sehen mögen, schalten Sie doch morgen ab etwa 8 Uhr, kurz nach 8, Radio Superfly ein. Da wird er wieder ein Interview mit Gerald Krafnicek geben. Am Mittwoch, es liegen auch einige Flyer vorne vor, um 17 Uhr bei Thalia im Center Wien Mitte in W3 gibt es noch eine Autorendiskussion mit 3 anderen Autorinnen zum Thema Was macht ein gutes Buch aus? Von 17 bis 18:30 Uhr. Und auf der Buchmesse sind wir mit dem Stand mit dem Verlag an Stand E28. Außerdem wird José am Freitag von 12 bis 12:30 Uhr auf der sogenannten Mastercard-Bühne noch einmal über sein aktuelles Buch sprechen. Auch da herzlich eingeladen im Rahmen der Buchmesse. Und ansonsten liegt auf jedem Platz so ein kleines Kärtchen. Damit können Sie den neuen Roman, der Band 3, der offiziell im März erscheint, vorab bereits gewinnen. Entweder, wenn Sie mögen, geben Sie uns nachher einfach das Kärtchen hier vorne ab oder auch auf der Buchmesse am Stand. Und ansonsten würden wir uns natürlich freuen, wenn Sie das einzelne Buch gleich hier erwerben mögen. Pro Stück kostet es 19 €. Ansonsten einen wunderschönen Abend.
I don't know if you have any questions to ask. I mean, I'm pleased to answer if you have. But usually people have questions after reading the book, not before, of course. So.
I have one question.
You read the book?
I read both.
Okay.
On Deutsch. No, you speak about truth and about facts. And I think this is a bit brave or a bit daring to mix these 2 words.
Truth and facts.
And
Yeah,
you
well,
say it's more or less the same.
Yeah, well, when I use the word of facts and truth, I use it in a common way we understand it. Of course, as I said, it is always possible that I wake up tomorrow and I realize I'm actually a butterfly that dreamt was a man. So this is always possible, metaphysically. But, I mean, even people who think about this, when they are driving, they don't run against a wall saying, well, I'll wake up as a butterfly. No, because we have a common sense of things. So it's a philosophical game. But in the end of the day, I mean, we have to work under some assumptions. It's important to say that in science, there is I think, what was it, Karl Popper, Austrian as well? Yeah, okay, Karl Popper, good. Karl Popper came up with a definition, he said, which is totally useful here, and totally true here, which is, in science, there is no such thing as definite truth. There are, things are truth as we know Until now, that's the current state of the art of the subject. But maybe tomorrow we discover something that will allow us to think that, well, what I thought about reality, actually it was wrong. There is something else new. So lies can be definite, but truth is always provisional. And I think that encapsulates things. So when we are talking about reality, when we are talking about truth, I use it always in the Karl Popper sense of, yes, it's not a definite truth. Even things that for us are obvious, maybe we find something tomorrow, and this happens all the time in science, and even in our common life. We discover things that we did not know, and it allows us to change our perspective of things. So, in that sense, that's how I use the word truth, not in a final revelation truth. It's the Bible, you cannot change it forever. No, it's not like that. Bitte schön.
I have a question. When you were talking about design also having a purpose, it sounded like you were hinting at maybe nature and all that we are has a purpose, but then I think you said, of course it is impossible to ever find out what this purpose is, but do you think, do you personally believe that it is possible to get closer to the truth of finding out what this purpose is scientifically?
Let's go back to Einstein. Raffiniert ist Ergot, meaning, no, we will never find it. We will never find out truth. And thanks to another Austrian called Kurt Gödel, came up with the theorems of incompleteness, which actually say that some things you know they are true, but you cannot prove them mathematically, and so there will always be. Nature hides its deepest level under a veil. You can see the shadows of it, but you will never be able, even for mathematical reasons, you will never be able to reach. I'm not sure if you are aware of Kurt Gödel's work. It's very interesting because he worked on a big mystery of mathematics, which is self-referential contradictions. For example, if I say, I always tell lies, well, this is not possible, because if this is true, I don't only say lies. You see what I mean? So, this is a self-referential contradiction. They thought this was a semantics problem, but when they translated this sentence into mathematics, the contradiction stayed there. And Gödel actually showed that the contradiction is unsolvable. So that's why it's incomplete. You see what I mean? So, in the end of the day, we will never reach truth. We can perceive the shadows of truth. Also about when you mentioned design, it's an important point, because especially when I talk to Americans, they came up with a concept which is, in America is very popular, which is intelligent design. Now, what is intelligent design? It's a crazy idea. That's not when I talk about design, it's not in that sense. Intelligent design is the idea that some groups have in America, and I think Trump is one of them probably, that, or at least Trump voters, that believe that the Bible is right, okay? And you just have to prove every instance of the Bible. No, the Bible is a mythological text, okay? You don't have to prove the Bible right. It's a literary text. It's about morality and stuff, okay, but it's not about physics. So I'm not saying that the Bible is right. It's not, as I said in the beginning, God is not, in my point of view, a religious problem. It's a scientific problem. And we have to deal with it using scientific methods. And so when we are trying to put the Bible there, we are just mixing things up. So in America they have this concept of intelligent design. It's crazy. Don't go into there. I'm not going to there myself. They're saying that Charles Darwin is wrong. Adam and Eve, that's true. It's not true. Evolution laws, they do exist. We know that as a fact today. In the Karl Popper sense, of course. But because I believe that Darwin is truthful, but incomplete for some technical reasons. Where I'm not it's another subject, it's biological. But the mechanism does exist. So my point is, no, we don't have to prove the Bible right, that it was Adam and Eve. what we have to understand is, okay, the laws of evolution are very clever. How come, where did these laws come from? Because it's such a clever device. How come particles, they create, they come together and they become more complex and they create behaviors of nature, including the laws of evolution? How come the laws of physics create laws of evolution? Now this is extremely clever, and that's the sense of design I talk about. If you see, for example, it's very interesting in biology, the human brain. One of the things, that's why I believe Charles Darwin is incomplete. It's because, like a good, it's because if you look at the evolution of the human brain, you will always see the evolution going to bigger. So there is one brain, like 1 million years ago, it's one size. Then 500,000 years ago, the fossil is bigger. And 200,000 years ago, it's bigger. And it's getting bigger all the time. And under Charles Darwin, it should not happen because it's random. But we know through mathematics and through physics and through the Gödel equation that randomness does not exist in nature except in short term. For example, let us suppose, let's go back to my euro coin. Well, this is 50 cents, Portuguese 50 cents. So I drop it. One side, it will be, head or tails, okay? Maybe now it's head. I'll do it again, it's head again, and then it's tail, and then it's head again. So I get 3 heads and one. Maybe I get 4 heads and 1 tail, but then I'll get a tail. So it's random in a short term. But if I do it 1 million times, we know as a fact that half a million times it was tail, and 500,000 times it was head. So in a long term, there is no randomness, okay? There is certainty. And that is what actually the Schrödinger equation is telling us about physics. You send the particle and through the slits, and 50% of the time will go through the left slit and 50% through the right slit. If you do it like 10 times, maybe it's like 7 times in the right and 3 times in the left. But if you do it 1 million times, it will be 50% in the left and 50% in the right, that's for sure. So it's deterministic in the long term. And when Darwin tells us, oh, it's all random, it is not possible, because it means, if this is true, that biology follows laws that are different from mathematics and physics, and this cannot be. So yes, there is randomness in the short term, but in the long term, you will find not randomness, you will find design. That's why the human brain always gets bigger. The fossils we find about the human brain always gets bigger. And if we follow the randomness theory, it should sometimes get bigger and sometimes smaller, but it doesn't. You see what I mean? So we see directions. There was actually before Darwin, but in the same time there was a French biologist called Lamarck who came up with that concept. Said, no, there are directions in evolution. And if you see a fish, it goes out, it becomes a frog. A frog moves and becomes a mammiferous, okay? But you don't find the other way around. A mammiferous will become a mammal, becoming a frog, and the frog becoming a fish. You don't find that. So there is a direction in evolution too. So in that sense, that's when I talk about design, it's always within a scientific frame. Never like the Americans do with their intelligent design, crazy ideas that they come up with, the Bible being the truth, and Adam and Eve actually exist and there is no evolution. That's crazy, and we're not going to follow that route. Yes, please.
I have seen this example of the two
Slits.
Spalten, on TV or in documentation a few days ago, and I'm also very excited about this new, new scientific development. And so, and that you said God is natural; He doesn't break the natural law. I feel it's very good. But it's also my opinion. But I think that there is not only this question mankind has, this scientific question in connection with God. There is also the question, why does man wise man was able to live together in peace. Yeah? Why? And how could men live in peace? And this you didn't touch at all, but this is connected actually with God, for men at least.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you're raising. I think I touched it in the book, but I don't go too much in that direction, but we can talk about that. You see, we have this anthropomorphic, as I said in the beginning, we have this anthropomorphic idea of God, the big birded man who looks into the ground, listens to our prayers. If God exists, He does not care if we respect the red light or not. He does not care if we kill that guy. I don't think that, because it's a natural thing, we are talking about something natural, like the laws of gravity. They don't care if you fall down the building, you die. The laws of nature don't care about that. So morals is a human creation, you see what I mean? And in fact, I've seen so many things in my life. I've seen that mean people actually triumph more often over good people than the opposite. This is true, I've dealt with a lot of politicians. I can tell you that there's some obnoxious people. Actually, a psychiatrist told me that that 10% of human population is a psychopath. Did you know this? 10%. 10% of the human population is psychopaths. Psychopaths. Okay? 10%. And in politics, it's 40%. This is true. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. No. These are very nasty people. Okay? And they triumph. They prevail over the others. So God is not moral. Moral is a human concept. Something that we created to survive. Because it's in our instinct. Because we know if we are alone in the middle of the jungle, the lion will come and will eat us. But if we cooperate, then we will stop the lion. And furthermore, we will get the deer and we will have dinner, okay, with the schnitzel. So that's the thing. So morals is something very human. I don't think that God or nature or whatever you call it cares about morals, cares about ethics. No, that's a human thing. That's something that we created to allow us to live together, and cooperate. Yeah, exactly. But that's a human creation, in my point of view. That's why I don't deal about that subject in the book, because it's not a scientific subject. I mean, it's scientific only in the sense of studying human nature. In that sense, yes, but not in the sense of physics, not in the sense of mathematics. No, it does not exist, that concept. So, yeah, that's it. Yes, please.
Is your book a bit autobiographic or not?
No, not at all. The main character, Tomáš is the professor. Okay.
But I have another question. Is this book translated in Persian language?
No.
Because I'm afraid for your life.
No worries. But let me tell you something about Tomáš. Tomáš, the main character, is a professor. He's not me, of course, but he teaches at my university, where I taught for 25 years. I did it, of course, because I know the space, so it's easier. It's something that's familiar to me. And in fact, we always, when we create a character, we always put something in him that's us, or it's us, or something that we would like to be, or there is something of us in all characters that we create. So in that sense, there is something, but it's not me, and consciously was not created. The character is not me at all. Please, son.
I didn't read any books of you, but I was invited, so I was very excited to hear about what you said. But the point is, I'm a father of my daughter, and in this moment, usage of nature or whatever is not caring about if we kill each other. Oh, this was too much for me. If somebody, some intelligent, created us as humans, all in these laws, there's somebody behind these laws who created it, like the pen, with a purpose. And my question is to you now. You have children.
Okay. Daughter.
Okay. How many?
2.
I have only one. But the point is, I love my child. And if my child makes mistakes, then I have to feel pain. And my question is now, if somebody created all these laws, and somebody created us, and we can feel love, why we can feel love? That's my question.
Well, it's a wonderful question. First thing I have to tell you is congratulations, you're a human being. So, yes, love is part of our existence. There is a conversation in the book where the character, Tomás, is talking to his dad. His father is a mathematician at Coimbra University in central Portugal, and he has cancer, so he's going to die. So they have this conversation. And the chapter actually ends with his father telling him, there will always be mystery at the end of the universe. We will never get all the answers. There are things we will never know. In a sense, my answer previously, wo schafft es ja nicht, aber raffiniert ist Gott, okay? So there is this subtlety, and this is very, very important. Now, about morality, really, what I think is, it's not that part. I don't think it's a scientific subject, because that's why I don't deal with it. Now, I believe that God is moral. No, I don't think it is. But I may be wrong. I don't have the answer. I know one thing for sure. Science did not study it. So maybe someday we will discover something. Maybe we will never discover, because it's so subtle, so raffiniert. We don't know. There is no answer to it. So your belief is as good as my belief. And I hope you're right and I'm wrong. Final question, sorry.
Is nature providing for reincarnation of the human being?
We do not know. But we do not actually, that's the problem of the other book, what happens when we die. What we know, however, is that consciousness creates reality. We know that. We know that. We know that there are things that are invisible to us, and we always have this intuition, this perception. It's like air. Okay, between me and you, there is a gas called air, but I don't see it. But the fact that I don't see it does not mean that it's not there. It's there. It's just that I'm not prepared to see it. My eyes are not good enough to see it, and your eyes, hopefully, are not good enough to see it as well. So there are a lot of things about life that we do not know, but we do get to have some glimpses of shadows. And the double-slit experiment gives us a glimpse of, yes, we human beings create reality. Because if we measure the particle, but we do not know the result, we'll get the interference pattern. But so it's a virtual particle. But if we have consciousness of the measurement, then it becomes a real particle, not a virtual one. So it means that we, by knowing something, we create it. And this is extraordinary, I think. I don't think we will be able to know much more than this, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we will find something. Maybe we'll get some other, maybe Austria produces some other Erwin Schrödinger, who will enlighten us about that. So, no answer to that, but, well, one day we will know. Thank you very much.